guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Maggie and today's video is all about the AMCAS work and activities section. I'll be sharing with you the descriptions that I used in my application to apply during the 2021 cycle, and I'll also be sharing with you the descriptions I used in my application from the 2017 cycle. This year was my second time applying to medical school and I got 15 interviews, 10 acceptances, and I don't know where I'll be going yet, but it was a successful cycle. And I really just followed Dr. Gray's advice. I watched all of his videos and I'll link my favorite video below that helps with the extracurricular descriptions. If you follow me on Instagram, you already saw kind of how I went about writing these, but I really wanted to show you the difference between my first application where I kind of wrote it more as a job description compared to this year where I really tried to tell my unique story. So I think this is a point where I'm supposed to say like my video and subscribe to my channel. Anyway, let's get started.
All right, let me start by saying you should watch Dr. Gray's video that I'll link below first, because I'm going to be talking a lot about job description versus storytelling and what it means to use words and sell yourself. And all that'll make sense if you just watch this video, because that's kind of terms he uses. And this is how I applied his advice. I'm going to go in order from oldest experience to newest, because that is how this application is laid out. So we start with being a member of Laguna's social tribe, which is, my college had sororities and fraternities that weren't sororities and fraternities, but it was the same thing. And this is actually interesting because I put this in both applications, and honestly, I probably could have left it out. It's not a very meaningful experience, but you can see what I wrote about it here in 2017. And I thought that I needed to say why I didn't do it longer than freshman year. And then here is what I wrote about it in 2021 or 2020. I was basically saying I did things outside of studying and riding horses, but it wasn't very meaningful. So I think it would have been fine if I hadn't put it, but obviously it didn't hurt me that I did put it. The one thing that I would say, if you have 6 experiences that are like this, then I think it kind of might hurt you, because you can tell this isn't very meaningful to me. And if half your experiences are like that, then not so great. But if it's one, oh well. So next is the equestrian team. Here's my 2017. And this is really cringeworthy. So Dr. Gray says a lot of students like to sell themselves, aka list qualities, saying I can think critically under pressure, and bad judgment calls or indecisiveness or doubt will have bad consequences. I'm listing all these qualities because it's oh, I want to list these and tell them, well, I'll be a good doctor. And then the last sentence is the qualities that it takes to be a good writer are all qualities that are essential to being a good doctor too. If you read Dr. Gray's personal statement book, he says, don't say this because you don't know what it's like to be a doctor. Avoid statements like that. So those are a couple things I avoided the second time around. And I told a story about a really impactful last show of my senior year, kind of how about for 4 years I was kind of trying for this one goal, and it was 1 point away my senior year. It was the last show of the season. All I needed to do was place, and I would finally go to regionals, and the horse stops at the fence. I don't place, and then the last part of my essay is talking about how, regardless, I still kept a positive attitude. I was so grateful for my time on the team for 4 years, and I just supported my teammates for the rest of the day, and I still had a great day and a good experience. So that was the story that I told. You can pause to read that. And yeah, riding horses was definitely, unlike Laguna Social Tribe, this was an incredibly meaningful experience to me. So that is why I chose it to be most meaningful. And next, let's go back to 2017. And I wrote about Froghead Girl. So I was a waitress, and I wrote 3 sentences. Don't know why I didn't even write a little bit more. But here is more selling myself, like Dr. Gray would say. I also enjoyed the attention to detail, accuracy, problem solving, and interpersonal skills it took to do well as a waitress. Also note the typo that I have in there. Use a free trial of Grammarly or something. Or what I did the second time around was copy and paste into Word, because it'll show you more than going into AMCAS, it will show you the squiggly, the red squiggly, but if you copy and paste it into Word, it'll show you more things that didn't catch. Granted, I still had 1 typo in AMCAS and 2 typos in my DO application. Embarrassing. Maybe try Grammarly. I'll link it below for a free trial. So in 2020, I actually put being a server as my most meaningful, and you can pause to read it. Move this out of the way. The reason I did this, and the top paragraph, actually the first two paragraphs, is from my personal statement in my 2017 application. I really liked how I told the story, it just didn't belong in my personal statement, so I made this most meaningful. And a lot of you might be like, oh, my server job was not meaningful at all. But to me, I worked a lot, it ruined my grades, and it made me sit down and realize that I need to figure out what I'm doing after college, not just keep working and ruining my grades. And it made me sit down and decide on my major. It made me I vividly remember sitting in my dorm room fall semester, unhappy, blah, blah, blah. I really sat down in my dorm room and was like, I'm picking a major tonight. I was so over it. And then my last sentence is, all thanks to my job as a server forcing me to reconsider my priorities and discover what I truly wanted. So I decided after that night, I was like, okay, pre-med sounds awesome. I'm going with it. I told my manager I can cut back to 3 shifts a week. And then after that, I quit the job. And I think working as a server was really the catalyst to becoming pre-med and just exploring medicine. Then I shadowed, then I was really hooked. So it was meaningful to me. And this is how I kind of wrote it as a story instead of in 2017, just listing, oh gosh, that is cringe worthy. Attention to detail, blah, blah, blah. So here I wrote about shadowing, and I had 2 different ones. I did the Atlantis project where I shadowed abroad, and this one. So yeah, I feel like shadowing isn't that meaningful because you're just watching somebody do it. But I don't know, it was kind of meaningful to me because it was really my first exposure to medicine whatsoever. But the second time around, I had a third shadowing experience, and by that time, I didn't even have the space to do 3 separate experiences. So I just listed it like this. Obviously, I just watched Dr. Gray's video, and he said you can list this, and that's what I decided to do for the contact name and title and email. If you're wondering, like, oh, 3 different people, how do I do that? I just did the most recent. And that's how I did shadowing the second time around. And oh, I think we skipped one here. I don't know why this isn't in order. Oh, it's here. Okay, so this was a volunteer experience where obviously in 2017, I didn't write a story. I just told them what I did, and that was it. I didn't use very many characters. And then the second time, I did a little bit of a story, but I kind of also still was job description. I just noted how this specific person was like, we had to drive 4 hours and stay in a hotel last night. And I mentioned how, regardless of how routine the surgery was, every patient, it wasn't routine to them, and they were nervous, and it was important to them. So it was important to me to help them make sure that their day ran smoothly and that it was just as least stressful as possible, is what I'm trying to say. So not a very great story, but I did a little more of a story than the first time. After that experience, these aren't in perfect order because it's just slightly different. This is another similar volunteer experience I had where I would sit at the information desk at a pediatric hospital, and parents could come up to me, and if their child was in surgery, they would ask for an update or to see if they were in post-op or to see their room number. And you can see here, what I just told you is what I basically wrote. And the amount of trust parents had to have for their child's doctor was profound. And I hope to one day earn that same level of trust when I am a doctor. I feel like that's kind of it's not false, but I don't know, it's kind of silly. And then what I decided to do in the second one was actually a specific story where I kind of made a small mistake. And I was trying to share here that I guess I learned from my mistakes. So I made a small mistake, and even though it was small to me, like, it caused this mom more stress. And I went to my supervisor's office to make sure that I knew exactly what to do in all those little situations. So that was kind of just how I decided to approach that story and change it up. And okay, chemistry club. This is a story I actually really like. So the first time that I wrote about the chemistry club, I just got straight up this second sentence. We have monthly meetings, seminar lectures, and fundraising events. I don't feel like you need that. Based on what I've watched from Dr. Gray, do you think that a lot of chemistry clubs have monthly meetings? Yeah. And seminar lectures? Yeah. Fundraising events? Yeah. I think literally you could copy and paste this into somebody else's application and it would work because this is what people do in chemistry clubs. And that was my thought process. It's like, okay, I want to change that to where it makes it unique to me, right? We're supposed to tell our unique story. So if you read this, you can note that I did talk about helping with demonstrations for the kids during our homecoming tailgate. And then I just spun with that because that was a really fun event. And I told a story about how we did this gummy bear experiment with kids. And then I really enjoyed that. And that was meaningful to me. And then I say one day those kids might think back to that fun memory and decide to major in science, knowing that exposing kids to science can impact them in such a meaningful way makes it immensely rewarding. So obviously, I'm not saying my descriptions are perfect. All I'm saying is that instead of listing a job description or a description of what chemistry club is, doesn't make it unique in my opinion. And this is what I feel helps make it unique and tell my story by just sharing an experience that I really enjoyed and why that's meaningful, because I like impacting kids and like sharing my love of science. So that's how I changed that one up. Research. So I didn't change this up much. You could probably write a story about research and come up with a story like I did for chemistry club. It's not easy, but I'm sure you could think of one. I was over it and I just listed what I did. One thing to note, so this is my 2020. Here's my 2017 if you want to read it while I'm talking. One thing to note, if you put research on your application, then, okay, here it is. This is the last one. You should be prepared to talk about it in an interview. Although the second time around, I didn't get asked about it in a single interview. But the first time that I interviewed at one school, they did ask me about it. And if I hadn't remembered what my research was about, that wouldn't look good. So just make sure that if you're a non-traditional student like me, where this was 3 years ago, you better bet I looked back at my research to at least make sure that I could explain it if I did get asked, because it just wouldn't look good if you're not able to explain it. And you can try and write a story if you want. I think in Dr. Gray's video, he says like you could think of something, but I wrote enough stories. I was over it. Next. So lab technician. I was on Dr. Gray's Mission Accepted, and he noted this last sentence. He would just go ahead and void that. It's kind of highlighting the negative where I said the job lacked the patient contact I wanted as a doctor one day, but I love knowing that I was helping treat a medical condition for a patient. So saying the job lacked what I wanted isn't necessary. It highlights the negative, which I didn't even, it's kind of easy to miss when you are being a little bit negative, but if you're saying something like that, then just go ahead and void it. If you, not good to highlight the negatives. I didn't have that job, 2017. All this is new stuff. So, helper for a disabled physician. I kind of just explained what I did. This wasn't a story, obviously. I think if you look at that, if you look at the title of this experience, it's not super obvious what you're doing. So if somebody looks at the experience name and it's Waitress, it's pretty obvious what you're doing. You're taking orders. But this one, I felt like I just explained what I did just in case they didn't know what I was talking about. Working as a nanny. Okay, this is an example where everybody knows what a nanny does. You don't need to say that you took care of kids and blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying that I am creative and I think outside the box and I like kids, I told a story where I did that. And I actually, we'll call her Ashley, this 8-year-old girl, they were having trouble getting to school on time. And so I decided to create these reward charts. And the 2 older boys were oh, too cool for that. But the little girl loved it. And she was so excited to get this ice cream from Wiener Schnitzel. And that was her reward for packing her lunch 30 days in a row. So I told that story in 700 characters, and it was fun because this is not like if I were to just write what I did as a nanny, I took care of these kids on these days and blah, 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 like anybody can copy and paste, put that in their application. But by telling the story, it makes it unique to me. So even though it seems hard to be like, oh, how do I write in 700 characters something that's unique to me? Like, how do I write a story? This is all I did. I just wrote about this 8-year-old girl where I motivated her to pack her lunch every day so she could be at school on time. Anyway, that was a fun story to write. It was fun to write these. It took me a long time to do this, but when you get into the storytelling, it actually kind of becomes fun. Another one that I did, I was kind of more of a job description because I was a caregiver / nanny for a quadriplegic mom, and it's not super obvious what that means. I mean, nanny is obvious, but so I I went into job description mode and just explained what I did and said it's rewarding to know that my role made a positive difference in Heather's life. We'll call her Heather. Okay, EMT. This was most meaningful, obviously, because it was my first real patient contact, and it was, oh my gosh, coolest experience ever. If you have gap years, I highly recommend trying to be an EMT. But my story, first paragraph, was about my first day of training. This makes me embarrassed just reading about it. Literally, my first patient ever, while I was training, I had to take his blood pressure, and it's a psych call, so the police was standing there staring at me, and I was just fumbling with the blood pressure cuff. I didn't really remember how to do it because I took EMT class 3 years before I actually started working as an EMT, so I kind of forgot, and it was really embarrassing, and the police was standing there staring at me. It was just, and finally my trainer just takes over and does it for me, and then we practice after that call, but gosh, whew, embarrassing. Tell that story. And then the second paragraph, I just go ahead and be like, but now, 6 months later, I'm able to confidently assess a patient, blah, blah, blah. And I have and then I kind of say what the experience meant to me. So I also learned that I thoroughly enjoy patient care, but I still look forward to becoming a provider that has a larger scope of practice. And then I note how I really became interested in OB-GYN specialty just because of a particular call. And then I have, if you go from the second paragraph to the third, it's like an awkward transition, and I just tell another story. It's kind of weird how I did that, but whatever, I'm not perfect. And I just talk about my experience. So this is really cool. We had this baby call where we went straight to the OR. This little baby was just had a C-section and just came out of the mom, and I got to listen to its heartbeat. So that's really cool. Kind of awkward how I put it in that story on the third paragraph, but those are the stories that I decided to share, and it at least was better than saying, I can think critically under pressure and assess and do this and blah, blah, blah. Instead, I just tried to show an example of when I couldn't do that and how I felt like I improved and then what it meant to me. And is that it? No, I feel like that is not it. One more. Okay. Note how this is only 10 hours. The only reason that I put this was because I didn't have any recent volunteer, and it was cut off due to COVID. If I had legit just started a volunteer thing and quit after 10 hours, I would not have put this on there. But it was only 10 hours. I would have done this for way longer if it weren't for COVID. So that is why I put it on. I would not suggest something you literally only did for 10 hours and then just didn't do. I wouldn't suggest putting that on here. But I didn't have any recent volunteer, and I just wanted to put it on there. So again, I read a story about my first day of tutoring. I tutored this really sweet girl, and legit on the first day that I met her, she was just so excited, and she's like, okay, see you next week, right? And every time she would always ask me that, and that's rewarding to me, and I love that, and I love mentoring kids. And so I decided to show how I like that in this story. And yeah, these were fun to write. Looking back, I hated how long it took and all that stuff, but it becomes fun, and you realize that, wow, you're really showing these admissions committees who you are through these stories. And okay, I'm sounding like a nerd now saying it becomes fun over and over, but that's how I decided to share my story. And then I got asked about a few of these during my interviews. So I mentioned that I didn't get asked about research this time around, but I did, obviously. I talked a lot about being an EMT during COVID. That was brought up. Another thing that was brought up in interviews, working with the quadriplegic mom and with the disabled physician, one person asked if that was a certain interest of mine and how I got into that. It actually was kind of serendipitous. I just happened to. I wasn't actively seeking those things, but so that was brought up during interviews, and I don't know that anything else was. So yeah, that was all that was brought up during interviews. It's good to review your application before, so you're able to talk about it. If you forget what you wrote, then it might be hard to answer a question they're asking related to your descriptions. But other than that, that is all the stories that I wrote.
All right, so I really hope that seeing those examples of my first application and second application descriptions and how I tried to do storytelling, I hope that all just really helped you avoid writer's block and gave you some ideas and examples. And if you watch Dr. Gray's videos, you should be all set to start writing your own Just tell your unique story and they will be awesome. Good luck in your journey applying to medical school. Subscribe if you would like to see more videos, and see you in the next one.